Hey everybody, this is Joey Tuccio from Roadmap. I'm here with Alex Robb. Hey Alex.
Hello, sir. Hello, everybody.
Hi. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I've been a producer manager for about the last 7, 8 years. Before that, I worked in various capacities of the industry. But to kind of start from the beginning, I originally got my degree in English and Film Studies from Michigan State University. Moved to California in 2004, and I worked in physical production for a number of years, literally from the bottom to the top. Sweeping floors on movies like Flight Plan. I did set construction and art department work on a pilot for NBC called Windfall. Did a lot of AD work, a lot of G&E. Did stunts for the TV show The Contender. That was Mark Burnett, Sylvester Stallone, Sugar Ray Leonard production. So I did a lot of that in the very beginning of my career and eventually segued into representation. And I worked for a very large and successful manager and management production company called Handprint. And we represented the likes of Mariah Carey, Jennifer Lopez, Tyra Banks, et cetera, et cetera. Moved to the Gersh agency and worked in TV, lit, and new media pre-writer strike. And was also the coordinator of new media at that time. Was there for about a year and a half. Eventually went to the Gotham Group, worked for the head of live action, scripted there, and they, amongst a bunch of others, when the writer strike hit, they kind of trimmed up the administration or the administrative support. So I was let go with a few folks, but ultimately that put me in a very interesting position because I worked in film finance for a while after that for a company called Grosvenor Park, which did single picture equity finance as well as gap and mezzanine financing, etc. Went from there to a company called Melee, which was a producer financier. They did Friday, You Got Served, Next Day Air, and was a development executive there for about a year or so, and eventually segued from working for other people and finally started my own shop and said, all right, I'm gonna roll the dice and see what I can do with my varied background and just essentially slowly built my foundation of my company, one client at a time.
Awesome. Geez, amazing. So tell us a little bit. You're going to be receiving a few written pitches. What do you look for in a written pitch?
Sure. It's a very diverse answer that I can give you. So first and foremost, the thing that I tend to look for is polish. I want to be able to seamlessly make my way through any writer's pitch. So the polish, the fluidity, the overall kind of, let's say, clarity, as well as the vision to bring a reader, to the point where they understand what the writer is going for is so important. So the polish is pretty much the first thing. Concept, character, things of that nature, they generally speaking, they tend to be less relevant for me because at the end of the day, if your characters are wildly esoteric or they are very cerebral and quirky and odd, take Mr. Robot for an example. I don't think anybody would clamor to develop something that was such an oddball type of series. And it's kind of evident because that series almost didn't get up off the ground, which isn't anything new, but certainly the uniqueness of that show with the uniqueness of the characters and the concepts. If the vision is there, if the polish is there, if the professional execution is there, then eventually you can find the right partners. So, I tend to be more open-minded about the originality of characters and concepts. When it comes to uniqueness, like how distinct something is, how fresh something is, how bold and innovative something is. Those are a lot of keywords that we hear today in the market where ultimately the things that have been kind of seen before or been there, done that, kind of down the middle. That type of content, it really doesn't move the needle, especially for emerging writers. It shows a proficiency for their ability to execute, but by and large, the 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 industry essentially has these bars that you have to get over, and for emerging writers to get over that hump, to get into the room where somebody is so enamored with the material that a writer executes on, for somebody to get to that point, they have to be wowed. So ultimately I look for the pop, kind of the, let's just say, the sizzle that makes somebody ultimately read something and come away feeling like, yeah, this is very well done. Because you can't always predict what somebody's brand is going to be, or what their development pipeline is going to look like. So I look for quality of vision, quality of execution, clarity with an elevation, something that doesn't, talk down to the reader, that has a sophistication ultimately to the read itself, because you want it to be captivating to physically read. You know what I mean? Um, as regards to like anything along the lines of, like, say, structure, I mean, if there is a piece that has a very specific structure to it, a la Tarantino, or say Memento or something, that has to be just very easy to understand, and it has to kind of unfold in a way that isn't challenging for the reader to follow what the reader or what the writer's going for. But I, generally speaking, say you get a lot more interest from folks when things are more character based. Even if it's a high concept property, it's character that sucks people in. That's the thing that we identify with the most, the human elements. Because we can't really identify with explosions, or gun battles, or action sequences, car chases and whatnot. Nobody lives that way. But what you can do is you can understand the emotions of what a character goes through. And that's where I tend to find the largest, most significant piece to any pitch and property is really, it's all in the characters.
Awesome. Really thorough. Thank you. So, what are some things that writers do by page 15 of the script that turn you on and turn you off?
Well, the first thing, of course, is you want to be able to lead the reader, kind of as if you're watching the show or the movie. Your eye, as it kind of goes across the page, has to be very easy for the reader to follow, right? You don't want the reader to kind of fill in the blanks for the things that are sometimes as simple as, like, the character's orientation amongst the others in the context of a setting. So if you've got a character walks into a bar, and let's say the protagonist walks into a bar and the antagonist is on the far end of the bar. Well, to understand the orientation and the layout of that scene is so important, and very often one of the biggest reasons as to why I will pass on material is if I can't really understand what the writer understands. So I look for that detail that makes the overall arc of a character, and the arc of a plot and subplots. That detail, just to make sure that, like, I'm not missing anything. Because if you breeze over things, you shortchange the opportunity to not only kind of carve out the cinematic elements, the pacing, sounds, let's just say even ultimately smells, that can be very important. It's that level of vision that I look for in the first 15 pages, and it has to build. If it doesn't build in a way that feels like it's moving somewhere, the characters aren't moving in a direction, or if I'm not invested by their plight or by their execution of personality, it becomes very difficult to want to get any farther into a script, because if a writer can't execute the first 10 to 15 pages correctly, how likely are they going to be in executing the rest? In a proficient manner that ultimately moves the needle with producers and buyers. So that that's kind of how I ultimately kind of look at for the first 15 pages. I mean, I don't need an inciting incident every time I read a script. I don't need an amazing structure of like revealing something in the beginning that comes back in the twist at the end. What I look for though is ultimately is to have that polish of bringing the audience slash reader along in a manner that is captivating, compelling, and that keeps you wanting to turn the page from beginning to end.
Great, awesome. And last question, any trends in the marketplace now? Anything that you feel executives, buyers are really wary of and
Sure.
for?
Generally speaking, in the television space, there is just a flood of crime thriller based content. It's ironically, crime thrillers take, say, like any Liam Neeson movie over the last 5 years is a great example. Those are one of the few genres that an emerging writer without any significant credits can actually get up off the ground and get running, because number one, they're generally speaking relatively scalable. So if you don't get a $30 to $60 million budget, but you end up finding a producer who has access to equity in the $5 to $10 million range, you can adjust your economics within the material and the overall production and still give that script life. Problem, of course, is that there are a lot of individuals doing that. So there, at the moment, probably for at least the next 6 months through the end of the year, there's going to be a saturation, I think, to the action thriller genre. The supernatural genre, especially in the feature space, is always ripe to be picked. Granted, we tend to see the Get Outs and the Blumhouse types of movies, and everybody tends to think like, oh, they did it for $3 million. I can do mine for $3 million, and it'll be the same. Unfortunately, the clout that is associated with the New Lines and the Blumhouses of the world really pushes the elevation of material to a point where it goes from being essentially a B movie to an elevated B plus movie, maybe an A minus movie, right? So when it comes to exploring anything in the genre space, uh, supernatural in particular, there has to be an elevation to it, because for something to move the needle, it's really got to ultimately be a piece that you're compelled by character, because a lot of the genre space is auteur driven. So producers and buyers will say, okay, well, what's the take? What's the vision behind the piece for the director? So if you're exploring the supernatural genre space, it's best to explore it through the eyes of something like, say, The Others versus, say, Insidious, because The Others is heavily dependent upon character, whereas Insidious is heavily dependent upon the cinematics, and that's all in the hands of the director. So there's too much competition almost in that regard of trying to get an Insidious-like type property out to producers who then can go find the appropriate genre director in a package, because usually those guys already have their next property lined up. So I generally say, if you're going into the crime thriller space, the supernatural genre space, the more elevated and character driven, the better. When it comes to medical dramas, they are the bread and butter of television, but it feels like in the cable space that we haven't had as many, recent opportunities to explore that genre in the cable space, and I feel like that could potentially be an arena that will be explored more so over the next 6 to 12 months. We've seen shows like Nurse Jackie, which have been great, but you can kind of just go down the network list and you can see where there are certain shortcomings, or where there have been, missed, let's just say, misfires by the networks and by studios. So I feel like that the opportunity to have a great ER-esque type of series is still very much out there. Period pieces, of course, are always difficult. You'll hear that, of course, across the board. I would say that if you explore the period of anything, you should be leaning towards a true story, preferably based on something. If you get the rights to a storyline as an example, I'm almost done with a period piece that's just post Civil War about the Molly Maguire Irish gang that that was relatively infamous in the coal country of Pennsylvania. They immigrated here. They were wildly oppressed, and that it's very timely in a lot of ways. So I'm packaging that with a few books, and I'm in the process of putting together the final touches on a pilot script and Bible, as well as a lookbook. So the preparation that I'm ultimately putting into this property is much higher than your average crime thriller, because the bar is so much higher ultimately to get producers and buyers invested, because it's riskier because it's more expensive to make period, right? But so there's an opportunity there, I think, if people look at period in the right way, but I would do it under the lens of it being a true story or inspired by a true story. Sports, of course, I would always avoid. They never move the needle. And unfortunately, Hollywood has virtually given up on teenage boys from the age of 12, 13, 14 through like 22, 26. That demographic, it just unfortunately doesn't have the content that they used to have to be invested, and they've primarily moved all of their eyeballs into the social media and the video game space. So buyers are very reticent to get behind anything that has a primary target of like teenage or early 20-something men. Trying to think if there's anything else, but that's a pretty good umbrella, I guess.
Yeah, that's great. It's fantastic. Well, that's pretty much it. So, Alex, thank you so much for this. And everybody get your written pitches together. And we will talk soon. Thanks, Alex.
All right. Thanks, Joey. And I look forward to taking a look at what everybody's got. All right.
Awesome. Thanks. Bye.
Talk to you soon.